Yeah. Hey, Russ. Thanks for getting it started.
Hello, Zach. This is Kevin Radke.
Hey, Kevin. It was good to meet you at the meeting.
Much my pleasure. Very much.
You liked it, I heard.
What's that?
You liked the meeting, I
Oh
heard.
no, it went very well, and boy, I learned a lot. It was. I've been to a lot of meetings in my day, and just the output and the conversations were very educational to me because I'm learning the product and learning how to deal with it, and that was just a wealth of information just hearing the conversations.
That's great. Yeah, I thought so too. It's always our annual meetings are always uh informative, if nothing else. Well, if much more, really. All right, I think we will get started. It's just past 9, I think. So in the past, my name is Zach Smith. I'm the product and training specialist at Growers. Welcome everybody to our first conference call in 4 months. This season is going to follow the same pattern, so we'll have a call every month on the second Thursday until April. April will be the final month that we do it, and then we'll take May, June, July, and August off. So in the past, we've had price update and office updates in October, but given that the CIA, the cash in advance discount period is earlier and the price is already being revealed, I thought that we would do that in this call. And so we're going to start off with Jim Halbeisen, our director of research, and then we'll have a few of the office staff on, Matt Schroeder, Osa Bobel, Craig Conklin, and Chris Coles. And if there's time at the end, I'll talk a little bit about the presentation that I did at the annual meeting, but we'll see if there's time. So remember, if you have a question, you can unmute yourself, the little mic button, or if you're on a non-internet connection, I guess it would be *6. All right. I think that covers everything. So Jim, if you're ready to go, you can go ahead.
Yeah, you got me, Zach.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, very good. Good evening, everybody. We had our annual meeting this week. That was very informative. Farmers from all over the country, basically, east of the Rockies, all the way to the Atlantic and then down to the Gulf of Mexico. I think it always is enlightening to see that the program works everywhere. The principles are still the same. Zach, on these calls, would like me to try to talk a little bit about current events as far as agriculture is concerned. And so that's the type of thing I'll do for you folks. And really, with the price being set for the product and fertilizer prices, which were a big item last year as far as inflation was concerned, the commodity prices are really going to be a key factor. Now you get into some of the specialty crops or specialty areas, it might not be as significant, but the bulk of agriculture is pretty well going to be run by commodity prices. And farmers are looking at quite a drop in corn and soybean prices. Wheat has been a real issue here for several months. And the World Agricultural Stocks in all positions report is really the one that kind of drives that price to a certain degree. And the last one here in September, which happened on Tuesday, the 12th, they basically lowered the yield on corn production, but they went ahead and raised the number of planted acres. And see, again, it seems to be kind of a ploy within the industry to try to control these prices a little bit. The tours that we have taken, Chris Cole and myself, and even Zach Smith was in on a little bit of that once we could get him over the border. We're seeing some serious issues out there in the field from about eastern Indiana to the East Coast. Those folks seem to get some decent rain here, starting, maybe middle of the end of July, and then been able to finish up with some decent rain and be able to recover from that early dry snap. But as you go to the west, that's been much more problematic. and see those issues. We have very good customer in Minnesota that had the crop adjuster, crop insurance agent adjuster that came to his farm to set his yield for him. And the information that we were fed is that this gentleman has reviewed fields in central Minnesota that are cornfields that are running from 15 to 50 bushel. So again, that's not coming over the airwaves from the government or even from the institutions. So again, I think guys that are looking at this marketing scheme, there's still a long way to go. And the on DTN and what they call their grow model, where they're using the Earth's imagery satellite to predict some of this stuff, they actually raised their yield again and took it to 182, whereas the government is down in that 173 range. And farmers are just questioning how these models can be so incorrect. And DTN is really scrambling to try to explain that. And part of that is going to the fact that this late season dry snap is creating some serious problems. Right now, the Mississippi River is almost to historic lows, even lower than last year. And see, there's another issue that goes along with that. The Panama Canal, they've had some serious dry weather in South America also. So they're struggling with the draft down there that's transporting grain also. So they're using that kind of as a mallet against the price of corn. But I think the low draft is showing you how dry some of these areas are. And if you read some outside literature, outside mainstream agriculture, with some of these economists, they're starting to say they think this late season dry snap is going to have some serious repercussions on both corn and soybeans. The crop tours that we did for our company, that definitely is the case that we could see. Corn, has been hurt and is struggling a little bit, but beans definitely have been hurt. And many of the farmers that we're working with have already consigned themselves to a significantly lower bean crop. And see, again, government's still talking, a little over 50 bushel, which, should keep the demand cycle pretty well satisfied. But I think that's going to come to a different light when the combines start running, and we're getting close to that. There's some areas, our guys in the South have been hammering it pretty good, but we're getting closer to the Corn Belt, and people are going to start going at it. And really, they're talking some more warm weather coming in next week. It's supposed to stay cool this week and then turn warmer next week, with very little discussion about rainfall. The only benefit we can really gain from that is that John Baranek for DTN is basically saying the polar vortex, they believe, is going to be pretty well contained to the North Pole, which will prevent rapid moisture movement across the country or North America. So they're looking for, some spots of moisture, but most of it should be dry, which should lead to a decent fall. And in the dry areas, it'll lead to a very fast fall. Already our guys in Minnesota, a lot of them are already done chopping. It just went, very, very quickly. So again, it looks like this dry weather is going to have some effect, as far as the production is concerned. So I think guys that are trying to make a marketing plan, they're pretty well saying that we're going to have a lot of product. They've been on the drumbeat of reducing corn exports for 6 to 7 months, basically. And they're saying even if production is cut, there's still going to be, enough corn to take care of the pipeline. By the way, the report from the ethanol industry this week was this is some of the highest production of ethanol that they've seen in the last 7 or 8 years. Again, because the margins are fantastic. Gases and diesel has turned around, gone the other way. corn has gone down fairly significantly. So the margins at these ethanol plants are pretty good. They're talking, a buck a gallon on some of this stuff. So they're just making it as fast as they can. So that is the demand cycle on that's gonna be very, very good. The blenders want to blend it because it's a cheap source of energy. So again, that's not being taken into full consideration either by the prognosticators. So that is kind of some of the current events. There's one last thing I would like to comment on. There was an article on AgWeb today about a young farmer in Tennessee that's been using poultry or turkey litter as a fertilizer source. And what happened to him was some of the acreage, it sounded like about half, maybe farming 900 acres, and he had 400 that was pulled into the physical boundary of a municipality. They basically, expanded their limits of the municipality itself in order to put in housing developments and that type of thing. But once this happened, there were different regulations within the municipality on odors. And this became a serious problem for this young guy and kind of really cut him off at the knees as far as spreading of litter because of the odor that did occur. And the thing that I found very interesting about this article was that AgWeb basically wanted to have comment from the municipality. So they basically contacted the municipality and wanted them to comment on, these regulations after they had brought this land base within the city limits. And of course, we all understand there's no comment. So then they tried to approach some of the city fathers on this to get each one of them to make a comment. And of course, right away, they're going to refuse to comment on this. But the most important part, I think, for us in agriculture guys is AgWeb tried to contact, or they did contact, the Tennessee Farm Bureau, and they wouldn't take a stand on this. They wouldn't even make a comment on this. And again, that's a serious problem for us. And from there, they went to the Tennessee Department of Agriculture, and they wouldn't make a comment on it either. So it looks like this young guy is pretty well going to have to lawyer himself up and try to deal with this situation. But I think for those of us in agriculture and in the agricultural business, there's not a lot of friends out there, guys. So we feel at growers, our ability to reach out and network within the organization, we think gives guys some very good information to work with. It's from farmer to farmer. And we think that's really a big part of our organization, and it's very, very helpful. We're glad to talk about the program, how to talk about high calcium lime and then in-furrow with fertilizer. But there's a lot of other things that our guys have experience with, and that it can be a farmer to farmer advice on some of this stuff. And really, we've got guys, after we make the growers tour, even at the annual meeting, everybody wants to talk about what we're seeing out there because they feel that gives them some of the best information to make good decisions, on their marketing plans. We're not offering marketing advice. Lord knows, I've made plenty of mistakes in my career, but we can tell them what we're seeing, and that at least gives you some definitive things to work with when you're trying to make those plans. Okay, Zach, that pretty well covers everything from my standpoint.
Thanks, Jim. Okay, so we're going to move into some updates from the office staff here at the company now. We're going to have on Osa Bobel, Matt Schroeder, Craig Conklin, and then Chris Coles. So Osa is going to come on first. She is the new president of the company since July, and she can introduce herself past that. Osa, where are you?
Hi, Zach. Can you hear me?
I can.
All right, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Osa Bobo. As I'm sure most of you know, Growers is a family-owned company. My husband, Russell Bobo, is the grandson of Joe Henry, who was one of the founders, making Russell and I the third generation of owners. We're both so excited to be part of this Growers family and are looking forward to continuing helping farmers for years to come. And for all of you guys who attended the annual meeting this week, we want to thank you so much for coming. It was really nice seeing some of you guys again. So that's all I got, Zach. Thank you.
Thanks, Osa. And Russ, did you want to introduce yourself at all? Or have you already?
No, I've I spoke with Kevin earlier when he first jumped on, but yeah, just happy to be here. It was a good week. Appreciate everyone who came and traveled. Some people coming from Minnesota and Wisconsin and making a far trip for the annual meeting. So we appreciate you guys coming, and it was good to see you guys. And we hope to see a lot of you guys throughout the year and for next year's annual meeting as well. So with that, back to you, Zach.
Thanks, Russ. I'll have Matt Schroeder on. So as anybody who's at the annual meeting will know, the company revealed the price of growers for the next year. We figured we would share it on this call as we usually do. But just so that the other salesmen and DMs know who were not at the annual meeting, you have a package on the way to you that will contain all that information as well. Matt, are you on?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Zach.
Thanks, Matt.
Good evening, everyone. It was great seeing many of you the past few days, and I hope your trip home was uneventful and you're getting caught up with all your work. So this year we put together a great team led by Jim Ward to work with vendors on our raw material procurement. And team was Jim Ward, Russ and Osa, John Clark, and myself. Can tell you that raw material vendors were really trying hard to hold on to those high prices and their high profits that they've had in the past several years. But we were very successful in getting the price of Growers Mineral Solutions reduced with lower raw material pricing. So we definitely want to remind you to send in your orders as soon as possible to ensure the most efficient delivery. Please don't wait until the deadlines to send in everything. Also, for the best, most efficient delivery, please be able to accept your delivery long before planting season, because we can't be in 20 places at one time. I know everybody wants it right before they plant, but we need you to take your delivery January, February, March would be, best case. Make sure we get that product to you on time. Also, as Zach mentioned, we'll be sending out those price letters with all the information to all the DMs and reps that were not at the meeting this week. And you can always call the office 24/7 to ensure that you're using the correct price. You can call, like I said, anytime, 24/7, and enter 751 to get the U.S. price and 752 for Canada pricing. So the price for the season will be in effect starting October the 1st. And I also wanted to say that there are several. There are some cash in advance discounts as always, similar to the last season. The 10% cash in advance period starts October the 1st and runs through December the 5th. In addition to those cash in advance discounts, there are also some other discounts that always apply year round, including that 5% cash check discount and also some other ones. So with all that said, we are very happy to announce a gross price of $17 per gallon, which is a $2.55 per gallon decrease, or a 13% decrease from last season. Again, don't forget, many of the discounts will further reduce that gross price. So the Canada price is $5.90 per liter, or a 90 cent per liter reduction, which is also about a 13% reduction. So we're very happy to announce that, and I want to thank you for your time this evening, and please don't hesitate to call the office with any questions. All right, thank you, everyone, and I'll pass it back to Zach.
Thanks a lot, Matt. I think everybody's probably happy to hear that new price. Next, I believe we can have Craig Conklin come on to talk about some transportation and delivery stuff.
Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good to go, Craig.
All right, mine's going to be short and sweet. I just want to say, customers that are getting tanker loads this year, we need to get those out as soon as possible. Can't push them back till April, 'cause we had a lot of problems doing that. We're also trying to cut down delivery costs. So if the customers can have totes or barrels, so they can take all of their product in one stop, so we don't have to keep going back, that'd save the company a lot of money. Salesmen, we need updated phone numbers and addresses. And one last thing, if any growers, GSC or NA is removed from the storage site, that needs to be written down and sent into the office, and so we can keep our inventory control. So that's all I got. Thanks.
Thanks, Craig. And finally, we'll have Chris Coles come on. He is our sales manager and did quite a bit of traveling this past winter and summer, and well, pretty well always, it seems.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Zach. Yeah, that's true. And I'll tell you, I'll have to attest, Jim and I did we're in a lot of cornfields in generally the Minnesota area and Wisconsin and up in North Dakota. We were in the, sugar beet areas. And I'll tell you, there was some spotty weathers. It was really strange to see, how dry it would be in one area. And then you go, just an hour north or west or east, and it would be, almost ideal. So the one thing I did really notice, guys, is going into all these fields, especially, the growers guys, is how they were hanging in there in some really tough situations. The one field that I saw that I, mentioned a few times at our annual meeting was that I think it was 40 acres in Lauren's area. One of his growers guys that had it on, one of his worst fields. He said he finally, decided to try growers and the high calcium lime, the whole deal, the whole program. And, it was all right, but he, got hit with really, 6 weeks, 8 weeks without any rain. And then he finally got a little bit of rain and then got hammered with some big hail, and it just shredded the field. I was amazed. And even Jim, was stunned to see how shredded it was. But then getting into the field, tell you, we pulled out some nice ears out of there. So it really hung in there, and, he'll get not an ideal produce out of it, but he'll get something out of it. But, that's what I noticed is growers, when, in a tough situation, can pull these guys through. So, really get out there, guys. It is selling season, exciting, I think, this year. We got a price reduction. So I think everybody's looking forward to this. I know I am. Just remember, to get, at the end of the discount, the cash in advance discount areas, just get your, make sure it's postmarked by the end date. Okay. So that's, something they want to stick to. So make sure, if you're right at that deadline, get it postmarked. And we always, end it on a Tuesday, except for I think the last month. So that gives you that, you don't have to get it in by Monday. You got till Tuesday usually to get it postmarked. Just get it postmarked by then. Appreciate that. Remember, delivery's included in that price of $17. Anything over 121 gallons, we have a slight delivery charge for that, $35, $45 in Canada. But that is included in the price. So just remember to remind that, when you're out there working those orders and talking to the customer. Also, we guarantee that delivery. You never know what happens in the future, but we, when we take an order, we make sure we have the product available when we take that order for delivery when they want it delivered. So that's something, just to keep in the back of your mind. Next week, guys, we have the Ohio State Farm Science Review right outside Columbus. Rumor has it Jim Halbeisen will be there, I think Tuesday and possibly Wednesday. So stop by our booth if you're in the Columbus area. All are welcome. We're setting up farm meetings. I know Jim's busy setting those up, late fall and winter. And, we're going to try to announce those dates. We'll do that obviously on our Thursday calls, anything we're going to be doing in the future 3 or 4 weeks. Then we'll also possibly put it in the source and maybe even have an area on our website that we can list those as well.
That's
So,
the solution, Chris.
I'm sorry. Yeah. always call it the solution. Yeah, it's a source. But anyway, okay. Working on a high calcium lime source database, for our whole area. So that's going to be, 30 plus states. Providence is up in Canada. We got some great ideas in our annual meeting. I didn't realize, but the USDA has a listing of all these quarries in every state, so we can start there. Then we got to verify, obviously, to make sure it's got the calcium magnesium ratio and nothing else. And so we got to get the data sheet. So it is going to take some time to complete that chore, obviously. But one of the goals I want to do is to list what we do find out on a list, and possibly on our website, that we'll have a list that you can reference on the website, and we'll build that as we go. So what information we do have, we'll get that on there as soon as possible, and then build from there. If you've got any information, just email it to me, please. If you got the quarry, the area it's in, and if you have a data sheet, that'd be awesome. Great too. We're also working on, got regenerated during the annual meeting again, about organic registration, and not through the OMRI registration. There's other certifiers out there that I found out, so there's possibly an avenue that we can get that in, but just initial stages of that. Let's see. Oh, I also wanted to announce that we have Kevin Racky, a new district specialist, kind of district manager, that's kind of exploring opportunities with us. He grew up in a greenhouse, has a ton of experience in greenhouse, I think up to 40, 50 years of it. He told me once he grew over 50 million plants in there. So he spent a lot of time in there, guys. He knows greenhouses inside and out. Also nurseries and golf courses and really business that we really haven't gone after much. So what our idea is to see what Kevin can do up here, educate us on that whole process and that industry, and how to attack that industry. And we look forward to that. And I know a few of you guys, a lot of you guys met him at the annual meeting, and look forward to maybe taking that specialist kind of DM around the country in different areas. So welcome aboard, Kevin. Good to have you. And that's about all I've got for this week, or this month. Zach?
Very proud to be here. I'm glad to be a member of the team.
Thanks, Kevin.
Chris, did you want to go over the CIAD periods, or do you want me to do that?
Oh, no, I can do that. Yeah. Hold
Sure.
on 1 second. Yeah, the first one starts October 1st through December 5th, and that's 10%. Just make sure you're postmarked on December 5th. The second one is at 8% discount, and that starts December 6th and goes to January 9th of 24. And the third one is 6%, and that starts January 10th of 24 and goes to the end of January, or January 30th, 24. And then the last period, the final period, would be 4%, and that starts January 31st and runs to February 29th. We also have our cash, check, and money order discount available at 5%. You have a local discount, 4%. You also have a mile-in pickup of 5.52 or 5.25%. You can only use one or two of those. You can't combine those two, local and mile-in pickup. So you have to select one of those two. We also have a volume tanker load discount of 5%, and then a second tanker load, you can get an additional 2%. That'd be 4,000 and 8,000 gallons there. Remember, those other discounts are available year round. And again, the US price is $17 a gallon, and the Canadian price is $5.90 a liter. That's all I got, Zach.
Thanks a lot, Chris.
Thanks, Zach.
So I wanted to say that Chris, Jim, and myself will be traveling around throughout the winter to put on meetings. Chris is going to be going to quite a few farm shows. I'll be able to get down to the States now, and Lord willing, that will continue for the long foreseeable future. So I hope to see a lot of you guys, salesmen and DMs certainly, but customers as well. It's been a long time and I've missed it. So I'm not going to probably go for half an hour more. I guess first, before I get started into what I wanted to talk about, does anybody have any questions or comments about what Jim talked about, or for any of the office staff? It's microphone or *6 to unmute yourself. Okay, I guess there's nothing. So I was reminded a couple of weeks ago by one of our DMs of something that Dr. Tejan's talked about in More Food, and that's that 75% of a plant's yield comes from the soil, and 25% comes from whatever inputs you happen to be using. That's at best 25%. And I think quite often, even though we know that I think it's 96% of plant tissue is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, that the inputs are accounting for a lot more of the yield and a lot more of the nutrition than perhaps they are. Recently, in like the last year, there's been some research with our research team to look at the effect of using less growers and even less nitrogen, but diluting it with more water at planting to see if that provides a greater benefit. And preliminary results seem to show that it does, or at very least that it's competitive with using more product and pure product. And the reason we think for that is that the primary benefit that you get at planting from using growers is in the effect that it has on those early microbes and developing that early symbiotic relationship between the plant and the microbes. And so if you're able to dilute that growers with water, which would cause it to spread out into the soil in a wider area, then you're providing that benefit in a wider area. And that seems to make sense that would give those plants that early boost that they need. I've been myself looking and researching a lot more into soil microbes, their relationship with plants. I'd like to learn a lot more and use that information to try to benefit our customers and our sales force. That was the topic of my presentation at the annual meeting. I've had some good feedback. I think I was probably my own harshest critic. It felt a little choppy to me, but I've had some good feedback, and I think some of the information was good. So I'd like to share some of that here. And something that I emphasized at the meeting is that I think when we talk about soil microbes, really what we're talking about is soil health. They're so tightly intertwined that in order to have soil health, you need to have a healthy microbial population. And on top of that, a lot of the research that I'm seeing agrees that microbes, mostly bacteria and fungi in the soil, and their positive relationship with the plant is what provides the plant with most of its growth and yield and nutrition. And so it's through the relationship with those microbes that the plant gains that. And so it was interesting, some research I was reading, and this is something I talked about at the meeting, that roots are actually not terribly efficient or well suited to absorbing nutrition from the soil on their own, in the absence of any kind of help from soil microbes. And there's a few reasons for this. One is that they're relatively large, and so they can only grow into larger spaces in the soil. They can't access a lot of the micropores in the soil. And since soil is not, nutrients in soil is not evenly distributed, quite often those roots simply are not going to come into contact with a lot of the nutrients they might need because they can't reach them. On top of that, roots can only absorb elements in an inorganic form, which in order for most nutrients to become an inorganic form has to be broken down by microbes. And so anything that's in organic matter that's not broken down sufficiently, it doesn't matter how much the root jostles around in there, it's not going to be able to absorb that. Also, roots are very energy intensive to grow. So to get a massive root system requires a lot of investment on the part of the plant. And there's no guarantee that the plant is going to get a proper return on that investment in the absence of soil microbes. So put all those together, and without microbes, roots, they can absorb nutrition, they can absorb water, they certainly anchor their plant into the ground, and you want a larger root system, but they really benefit from that microbe relationship. And one of the easiest ways to show that and explain that is in there what a fungal mycelium network looks like. And if any of you have ever had healthy soil and dug it up and you see this spider silk going through, then that's what you're looking at is fungi. These kind of fungi are called endophytes. All that means, endo is in and phytes is plants. It just means they grow into the plant roots, and that's how they can provide nutrition and water to the plant. But then they grow out, produce these networks, and these strands can go down to so small, like you can't even see all of them. The ones you can see are obviously the larger ones, but they can reach into pores in the soil that roots have no hope of ever reaching. And once they're there, they can access the organic matter, the nutrients, the moisture from that area. And so you can take a root system that on its own is relatively small, and you can make it exponentially larger if it can develop a relationship with mycelium network. And so that alone drastically improves a plant's ability to access nutrients and water in the soil. One thing I read is that in a basically a cubic foot of soil, and with a healthy mycelium network, it can have up to 1 kilometer of strands, just to give you an idea of how dense these things can be. These fungi provide other benefits as well. They're predatory. They'll attack and consume pathogenic nematodes, other fungi, and so they can help protect the plant that way as well. Another interesting fact that I think really points or helps prove that that plants really rely on this relationship with bacteria and fungi is that a plant will allocate up to 35% of its sugar that it produces through photosynthesis as root exudate, which is what it releases through the roots as microbe food. I never figured that number would be that high. And so you've got to ask, why is it that high? Why would a plant allocate a little bit more than a third of the energy that it produces to pushing it out into the soil? And the clearest answer to me right now seems to be the plant knows how important that relationship with those microbes in the rhizosphere is. And so it's an excellent return on investment for it to allocate its resources that way. And so I found that very interesting, and the point that it seems to prove. And this circles back to what I was talking about before, right at the beginning, with Dr. Tejan's and 75% of yield coming from the soil and 25% from inputs. He didn't know in his time, nobody did, the full extent. I mean, we still don't. I think we've still barely scratched the surface of those microbe populations under the earth. He knew even less than we did, but he knew that they were there, and he knew what made healthy soil, even if he couldn't exactly explain why. And so I think when you're talking about that 75%, it's not that, it's just that 75% of the nutrients are being sucked up through the soil. I think it's that a lot of that growth is coming from a healthy soil, which has a healthy soil microbe population. And this kind of brings me to more of a grower's connection, and for our salesmen and for our customers. For a long time, our emphasis has been on economic or environmental and or sustainability. We want you guys to be able to operate your farms well into the future through many generations, and which means that the farm needs to be profitable, which means that you can't be spending your grandchildren's inheritance on inputs, and you need to be getting enough yield to make money and producing healthy food, depending on what you're growing, whether you're feeding people or livestock. Dr. Tietjens was well ahead of his time. You've heard Jim say this if you've ever been to one of his meetings, but probably the most important thing that these microbes need in the soil is oxygen. And that has been our focus with the use of high calcium limestone for 68 years at this point. And I really can't emphasize enough how important that is. There's a process called rhizophagy, which is root feeding, where roots will feed on microbes. And they produce a superoxide in that process, like hydrogen peroxide. That's not what they produce, but it's like that, which will dissolve cell walls of bacteria that enter their roots. And then they can absorb the bacteria's innards, for lack of a better term, and the nutrients that are in them. And they can't do that without soil oxygen. And so this whole process will stall in a locked up soil. And most of the bacteria and fungi that will form these symbiotic relationship with plants are aerobic, so they need oxygen as well. Additionally, applying a lot of chemical fertilizer to the soil, not only like a non-neutral pH, high salt content, heavy metals, we've talked about those things before. Those aren't good for soil microbes. Something I think we haven't talked about as much is that there is a cycle for every nutrient. We've all heard about the water's not a nutrient, but we've all heard about the water cycle, the carbon cycle, the nitrogen cycle, and so on and so on. Every nutrient has a cycle in the soil, a way that it is made available, made unavailable, way that it's used, and the cycle goes on. If we didn't have a cycle, we would run out, just the way it works. Well, adding chemical fertilizer, quite often, a lot of it will disrupt these cycles for nitrogen especially, which is probably one of the most, if not the most important one in the soil, because nitrogen is very important for microbe energy. If you apply a lot of nitrogen fertilizer, chemical fertilizer, it can disrupt this cycle because it will chase away macro invertebrates like earthworms and such that can initially break down a lot of that organic matter, but it will chase away nitrogen fixing bacteria as well. And they are kind of the gatekeepers of this cycle in the soil. They'll take nitrogenous gas out of the atmosphere and they'll make ammonia and nitrite and nitrate, all of which are plant and microbe available. Only nitrogen fixing bacteria can do this. The other microbes can't. It's nitrogenous gas is as unavailable to them as it is to plants. Even plants that make those root nodes, legumes and stuff like that. All those nodes are is housing for nitrogen fixing bacteria. The plants themselves can't fix nitrogen. And so if you shortcut that cycle by dumping chemical nitrogen fertilizer on, eventually you are going to wreck that cycle in the soil. Additionally, it takes 15 molecules of carbon for a microbe to consume 1 molecule of nitrogen. And so you can quickly burn out any organic matter in your soil, which is where most of the carbon is going to come from, if you're continuously applying that. And so I think that's the best example of the effect that applying those nitrogen fertilizers in large amounts will have on the soil over a long period. And once you break that cycle, well, now the only way that you're going to get adequate nitrogen is by adding it, which further breaks the cycle, which means you need more. And it becomes a vicious cycle, as it often does with dry chemical fertilizer. And so, on the one hand, you get your soil working well. We're really thinking that you can cut down on the amount of fertilizer you use, no matter what kind of fertilizer you're using, be it dry or growers or whatever. But if you are going to use a fertilizer, growers is non-extractive, meaning that it does not extract other nutrients out of the soil. Potash, nitrogen, stuff like that, that's all extractive. It will do that. And so you will, in a way, it actually depletes the soil, which is kind of rich considering they always talk about you're going to mine the soil if you don't use those fertilizers. In reality, using those will extract other nutrients, carbon being one, I already explained that. Calcium is another one. Be it adding nitrogen or potassium, both will extract calcium out of the soil. You've seen that with lots of guys who haven't used any calcium on their farms for a long time. We actually have one of our salesmen in Pennsylvania has a really good story about that, about using a lot of potash and not seeing any results until he put some calcium on. And that's what was happening. The potash was extracting the calcium out. He did see results for a while, and then when there was no calcium left, didn't matter how much potassium he threw at that field, it would not produce, because it was not potassium that was missing, even when he was throwing way more than the average amount on, he was still getting potash deficiency. It's extractive. It depletes the soil. Depleting the soil is not making the soil healthy. It's just causing you to have to spend more money to grow a crop. This has been our focus since 1955, is to contribute toward our customers' success, not milk our customers for every dime. And so we're continuing to do research into this area, how to improve soil health so that you can cut back on inputs and still get a competitive, healthy, and profitable crop. I think that's where I'm going to end it for now on my presentation. Are there any questions?
Hey, Zach, can I jump in now?
Yeah, for sure, Jim.
Yeah, this is a subject that's really, we've started to focus more on. The whole industry has gone this way. You know, the bug in the jug idea, and of course the big one is Pivot Bio Proven 40, which has used the approach, in my opinion, of massive advertising and so-called expertise. But again, what we're seeing in the industry is what I would say is not a lot of expertise. There's a lot of advertising and pushing on this. And what we're noticing is that the fertilizer companies are getting in on the act on this. And see, with the high price of fertilizer last year, there's been a massive investment by Nutrien, Mosaic, and buying up these small companies with the idea that they're going to present a sustainable way for farmers to progress into the future. And in many cases, I think they're just trying to collect, you know, what amount of money farmers are going to spend on the fertility side, and see the actual knowledge about what we're doing with this microbial complex is not very good. And we've encountered a woman from New York, Judith Fitzpatrick, that's had been a fantastic help to us, because she spent a lifetime working in microbial science. And that's really helped us learn some of these things. You know, when Zach's talking about the idea that the plant root itself is not very good at absorbing nutrients because of its structure and its size, the rhizophagy idea that's been promoted by James White from Rutgers University goes forward to explain a lot of various things. In other words, to get the root to absorb the nutrients, you've got to break it down into its inorganic form. Whereas if the root can ingest the total microbe, that total ingredients now gets released into the plant root. So basically, you could take organic radicals right out of the soil and not have to break them down into inorganic elements in order to get the root to absorb them. You can just transpose them directly into the plant. And what's interesting about that, you know, you could be talking about organic radicals like something like penicillin, which originally was discovered in the soil and is a very good antibacterial compound. And see, if the plant is in a symbiotic relationship with the microbes, it's possible for these microbes to transpose that directly to the plant. So again, that explains a lot about the efficiency of using the system that Mother Nature has developed. And see, like Zach pointed out, this is what the growers program is all about. We feel that the species of microbes that create the best success are aerobic. And see, this is pretty well the way our grandparents and great grandparents farmed. You plow that soil, get that air in there, use the rotation to build the biological complex, and then um, you don't need a lot of fertilizer to create success. And see, a lot of the institutions are condemning the grandparents, saying, well, they didn't grow 250 bushel corn. Well, they didn't have the genetics to do that, although there are reports in old literature, that go back to the American Revolution that showed 200 bushel corn. So again, this biological thing has gained a lot of steam within the industry, but the knowledge of how it works exactly is not necessarily following up on that. And see, the institutions don't have the money to do that. A lot of this research is spillover from human medicine. Pharmaceutical companies basically are working on immunotherapy, and see, they have developed techniques that have been very helpful to people like White from Rutgers to figure out some of these things that are actually happening in agriculture. And then again, with the major fertility companies investing into these small startups that are focusing, on the biological aspect of soil, that pretty well speaks to where we're headed. And see, they're going to use it as a sales tool that they're promoting sustainability, when in reality they're just making another offering and trying to gain as much of that fertility dollar as they can. Also, Zach, getting into the cycles, it's very interesting to note that we had a gentleman by the name of from the University of Illinois that came and talked about over fertilization with nitrogen. Richard Mulvaney, sorry about that. And Dr. Mulvaney has done some recent research where he has radioactively tagged nitrogen and applied that to the crop through fertilizer, and then harvested the total plant, both the stalk itself and the leaves, and then the ears also, or the kernels, and then has tried to analyze, or has analyzed, for the radioactive nitrogen. And what he has found, that still the majority of nitrogen that's going into the plant is basically coming out of the soil. And some of the fall applied nitrogen, like anhydrous, for example, the percentage that's coming from that for fertilizer applied nitrogen is less than 20%. In some cases, it was down in 16, 17% range. And in most cases, it was always under 30%. And see, that backs up what Victor Tegens was saying in More Food and from Soil Science, is that 75% of what the plant is using is actually coming out of the soil. And Mulvaney's research has pretty well substantiated that. And so what we've tried to do is figure out how to educate our customers about this. And again, the education is very important, but the techniques are still the key thing. We sell results, applying the program, applying the GMS, getting results from that, and economically, surviving, and then doing it in such a manner that your next generation can come along and be successful with it also. That's a key factor to us. And see, Zach has done a real nice job of investigating this, because really myself, I go back to, my master's, everything was predicated on chemistry, some physics, but the biology part of it was very, very weak. And see, Zach's had training in the environmental sciences, which have kind of leaned in the biological way. So that's kind of given him a little head start on this thing. And so we've tried to get Zach to kind of self-educate on this, because all this stuff is brand new, guys. I mean, it's just coming out now. And what we're seeing in the industry is there's not really a lot of knowledge being thrown out there. It's a lot of hype and a lot of sales gimmickry and advertising. And see, a lot of our customers are looking at, various ways to work with this this biological portion of the soil, compost tea, these types of things. Guys are trying to develop to propagate their operation. When we go to the Delmarva Peninsula and have our meetings during the winter, those guys in that area, which is the east side of the Chesapeake, they're trying to develop compost that they can spread that and basically walk away from chemical nitrogen. And see, this is a goal of a lot of other individuals that are making compost teas or developing compost in their operation or in their fertility side of the operation. So this is the type of thing we'll continue to chat about. Zach mentioned there early, diluting the growers with water, trying to spread the area out. That's going to influence, the biological complex. We have guys that are infurrowing, using some water with it, but then they're going 2x2, using more water, trying to enhance that area in the soil that will be effective on the biological complex. And see, we get into larger operations, the fastest way to do that is foliar feeding, but that promotes or shows some challenges to bigger operations. So we've been able to try to help through this in-furrow and 2x2 application to try to work with the foliar feeding to try to put it into a workload situation that guys with more acres to run, trying to work it with fewer bodies and less manpower, so they get a very similar effect. And so those are some of the types of things we'll try to discuss, on these Thursday evening meetings or conference calls. And then the guys in the organization that are using these things can talk about what they see, what they like about what's going on, and some of the ways they've been able to implement that. Cost of equipment to go 2x2. In some case, John Deere thinks that green paint's pretty impressive, and see, there's ways to try to get around that, and our guys figure out those types of ways. So that's something, information that can always be shared by other farmers. They're part of the organization, and that goes back to what I was talking about before. The networking within the organization is a very, very, very key factor. So Zach, I'd say you're ready to ask for any questions. If anybody's got a comment, they can jump on now. And then you're in charge again, Zachy.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, are there any questions?
The term regenerative agriculture compared to organic, with growers, we're more in the regenerative cycle, aren't we?
Yeah, I think so, Jack. It's the organic thing, they've got certain standards or things that they feel have to be applied, which they think creates a more healthy environment. The regenerative one, you're using
all
things
these
that
systems.
they're not rubber stamped by the organic industry. And some of these things have been around for a long time, and it's basically creating an environment that gives you the proper species accumulation for symbiotic relationships. And see, the organic people have not really had the discussion of the microbial complex. They've really rubber stamped the organic approach as being, the successful way. And what we're seeing is trying to induce the microbes that are already there through the additions that you're using. Will give you a more symbiotic approach, which really is, you're just trying to work with Mother Nature more closely, and rubber stamping different products that will do this uh, is not as high of a purpose by the industry, because there are different things you can do to really get that oxygen flowing in there. And again, the type of high cal you use in many cases is refused by the organic industry. So again, I think you're on the right track there, that we're in a more regenerative process and not just trying to rubber stamp, different products that can be utilized.
There's some producers that are doing this crop rotation, forage crops, and they're not using any fertilizers at all. It's kind of like their grandparents did it. And
Yes.
I
Yes.
see that as being as healthy or more healthy, because some of the products that are promoted organically, I don't know, I some of the things I just have
Yeah,
I'm not convinced.
with with organic, a lot
Yeah.
of organic certification, they're not really looking at cleanliness of product as much as what's been done to it. And so in growers' case, it certainly has been chemically altered, but that chemical alteration is to remove heavy metals. Our urea doesn't have any formaldehyde on it or in it. And so I think there's a lot more overlap between our growers program and regenerative agriculture, because we both have a very heavy emphasis on soil building. And that's really on soil health, building healthy soil.
And the elements we're providing for the rhizome area,
Yeah, the rhizosphere.
that's what they need, or the bacteria need, to be able to make it bioavailable to the plant. Is that correct?
Do you mean like the elements in growers, or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's right, Jack. You're on the right track there. In other words, the by lowering the metal levels, and see, another thing that nobody really thinks about is the balance. You've got the induction of the micronutrients in certain proportions, and see, the industry basically looks at it. They can slug feed anything. Well, you're deficient on copper, just pour the copper to it, and see that Victor Tegens didn't buy that at all. He felt the only way to get copper in there was to put it in balance with the NPK and then the other micronutrients. And see, balance is a big part of that. And like you said, we're trying to feed both the microbes, and we'll feed the plant directly if you plant too cold and they aren't working. But if you feed those microbes, they'll eventually be called on by the plant to supply those minerals also.
Yeah.
And growers, we've seen in experiments that growers is consumed readily by microbes. They don't avoid it like they do more toxic fertilizers. And so we know that low toxicity is doing its job.
Right.
And
Yep.
back to like I talked before about large amounts of chemical fertilizer disrupting nutrient cycles. I don't think growers would do that. Obviously, I haven't done that research. But even small amounts of dry fertilizer are not going to destroy those cycles. And so the small amount that we recommend using, and how it's used, right? Like, there's very few cases where growers is going to be sprayed directly onto the ground, and definitely not poured across it or broadcast in any way. It's used, it's targeted. I use that word a lot. Foliar spraying on the seed, even 2x2, it's all close to where it's being used. And so that broader cycle isn't being disrupted there either.
That'd be a waste of money to really broadcast it.
Yeah, it's far too expensive to go about doing that. Thanks, Jack. Are there any other questions? All right, well, it's 10:05, so our hour is up. Thank you, everybody, for listening in. Our next call is going to be on October 12th at 9 p.m. again, Eastern Time. And I hope everybody has a good night.